بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أبناء الطلاب وزملاء أطباء الدراسات العليا، يسعدني أن أقدم لكم هذه الأفلام التعليمية التي تتناول الجانب العملي لمادة التشريح. فنشاهد الآن هذا الشريط على أمل أن يحقق الفائدة المرجوة منه مع تمنياتي لكم بالتوفيق. يقول الله تعالى: وقل اعملوا فسيرى الله عملكم ورسوله والمؤمنون. صدق الله العظيم.
Now we are going to demonstrate some of the parts of the limbic system. This is the gyrus fasciolaris, which is a small ridge of gray matter on the inferior surface of the splenium of corpus callosum. This gyrus is continuous anteriorly with a slender gyrus having transverse notches like teeth, and hence is called dentate gyrus, which lies on the medial surface of the parahippocampal gyrus and is situated under cover of the fimbria of the hippocampus. This is the splenium of corpus callosum. This is the posterior end of the cingulate gyrus, which is continuous with the hippocampal gyrus. And this is the body of the fornix just under cover the splenium. This is the temporal lobe, and this is the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle open. This is the dentate gyrus, which is a long, narrow strip of gray matter lying on the upper surface of the hippocampal gyrus under cover of the fimbria. This is the fimbria, which arises from the swollen anterior end of the hippocampus. This fimbria proceeds backwards to become continuous with the crus of the fornix, and this dentate gyrus proceeds backwards to become continuous with the gyrus fasciolaris. This is another specimen of the temporal lobe. This is the anterior temporal pole, and this is the posterior occipital pole. This is the hippocampus in the floor of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. This is its swollen, rigid anterior end and is called pes hippocampi. This is the fimbria of hippocampus passing backwards to become the crus of the fornix. This is the crus of the fornix lying in contact with the splenium of corpus callosum. It should be noted that the dentate gyrus lies under cover the fimbria, while the choroidal fissure of the inferior horn lies just above it. Through this choroidal fissure, the choroid plexus of the inferior horn protrudes into the cavity of the horn. This is the body of the fornix, lying over the thalamus and below the posterior part of the trunk of the corpus callosum. This is the thalamus, and this is the corpus callosum. This is the anterior continuation of the fornix, which is called the column of the fornix. It passes forwards and descends downwards in front of the interventricular foramen, which connects the third ventricle with the lateral ventricle. The fornix is continuous posteriorly with its crus, which lies below the splenium of corpus callosum. The column of the fornix is separated from the corpus callosum by a thin sheet of white matter called septum pellucidum. This septum pellucidum forms the medial wall of the anterior horn and the medial wall of the central part of the lateral ventricle. The column of the fornix curves forwards and downwards over the thalamus, from which it is separated by the choroidal fissure, through which the choroid plexus protrudes into the central part of the lateral ventricle. This is the choroidal fissure, and this is the choroid plexus bulging through the interventricular foramen. This is the interventricular foramen of Monro. It connects the third ventricle with the lateral ventricle. It is bounded posteriorly by the anterior end of the thalamus and anteriorly by the column of the fornix. The column of the fornix sinks into the hypothalamus to end in the mammillary body. At the level of the interventricular foramen, the column of fornix lies just behind the anterior commissure, which is a transverse bundle of fibers connecting the two temporal lobes together. This is the commissure section. This anterior commissure crosses the midline just behind the lamina terminalis. This is the lamina terminalis. The structures in this region from before backwards are as follows. This is the para-terminal gyrus, just in front of the lamina terminalis. This is the lamina terminalis. This is the anterior commissure. This is the anterior column of fornix. This is the interventricular foramen. This is the thalamus, having the body of fornix above it, with the choroidal fissure in between. This is the splenium of corpus callosum, below which lies the crus of fornix. This is the pineal body, protruding backwards above the tectum of the midbrain.